Sure thing, affirmed Logan. He explained about his black eye, and the way he had covered it up using her cosmetics. So, after seeing what you did with your wrist bruises, I gave it a try. No one noticed a thing. I wouldn't be too sure of that, she said, smiling. Why not? Well, I noticed right away. He shrugged, undaunted. You're an expert. Thank you, dear, but there's another thing. That makeup has a slight scent. Didn't you notice? No. Really? Yes. It's not very strong, after all, subtle is our trademark, but it's there. So, maybe someone was wondering why I smelled so, what? What sort of smell is it? I really didn't notice. It's probably no big deal. It's just a light combination of powder and musk. Not quite gender neutral, maybe, but not obvious. Oh, okay. Whatever. No one seemed to notice, anyway. And thanks to not looking like a troublemaker, I got that contract extension. They made their orders, then Logan changed the subject to his wife's week. Anything special with you? Well, I missed you, Jayla said, grinning. Good thing, he said, matching her grin. But I got my own good news, she declared. My design for redheads, meaning my selection of colors and applications, got accepted by the company for their new brochures. I'll get a nice bit of royalties from that. Good for you. Maybe I should make you pay for dinner. Maybe, she said, but there was a bit of distraction in her tone. What else? Logan asked, picking up on it. Now it was Jayla's turn to blush. At least hers was becomingly symmetric. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted, not quite uncomfortably, more like self-consciously in her seat and blushed again. What's the matter? He asked again. I owe you, she said. Logan shook his head, a confused look on his face. No. I just told you. I owe you for showing me how to cover up my black eye. That was nothing, Jayla asserted. I owe you for being a guinea pig for my makeup experiments. No big deal. She squared her shoulders, a motion that did surprisingly active things to the shapes within her jacket, and said, no. It is a big deal. And I feel that I owe you. Logan tried to interrupt, but she held up her hand and plowed on. I know what you're going to say, and you're right. People in love don't keep score, or do things for each other only because they feel obligated. I know that. But you're wrong, too. Maybe that's the biggest thing I owe you, for showing me that. I owe you paying enough attention to you that I can tell what would please you without you asking. I owe you my attention and my willingness to please, not merely acceptance of what you want, but active willingness. Her husband settled back into his seat as she talked, recognizing that this was something she had been thinking about quite a bit. He nodded, not so much in agreement as in confirmation of his attention. She smiled at his nod, relaxing a little now that the words were flowing. I don't owe you anything because of any one thing you've done or any list of things you've done. I owe you everything because you love me and are willing to do your best, a very considerable best, to make me happy. With that, she seemed to have run down a little. Logan reached out to take her hand in his and said, quite a speech, beautiful. And I won't argue with the basic logic as long as you realize that I owe you at least as much. Jayla nodded, smiling again, then said, so, I've decided I'm going to dream up things to do that interest you. Hopefully you'll find them pleasing. If not, well, some experiments work better than others. Logan murmured. An interesting idea, at least. I like it. Okay, I'll dream up things to do for you, too. It should be fun. You don't have to. Jayla began, only to stop in a blush at her husband's huge grin. Touché. Okay, we'll both invest a little creative energy in each other. And it should indeed be fun. She squirmed in her seat for a moment, then looked Logan in the eye and grinned a very mischievous grin. Not saying a word, she undid the buttons that held her bolero jacket tight to her trim waist and pulled it open a bit. Through her white, sheer blouse, Logan could see her darkly shaded, tautly erect figure, especially when she took a not very subtle, but quite impressive breath. "No bra," he gasped, conscious of a very definite sign of interest on his part. "More than that," she smirked. At his perplexed look, she giggled and whispered, "No panties, either. From now on, I just may not ever wear underwear when we're together." The grunt of something very like surprise was probably not the response she expected from her husband, though his own squirm gave a pretty good insight into the cause. "Score one for you," he finally managed to say. "I honestly had never even thought to suggest that to you, but you certainly found something that is, interesting." "Good," Jayla said. "Gotcha." "Indeed," Logan replied, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Jayla reached out to lightly slap his shoulder and said, "No you don't." "Don't what?" he asked innocently, or at least with an attempt at innocence. "You're trying to think up some way to, get back at me for this, some sort of counter. This is not going to be a contest where we each try to one-up each other." "Good," Logan said, laughing. "That way we won't have to take turns. I can think of half a dozen things to do immediately." "Well, so can I," she said, trying to project a threatening tone. Somehow it came out more like a promise instead. "Like what?" "I'm not telling," she said. "Me, neither," her husband countered. Then his expression changed as an idea came to him. Maybe I will. At least one thing." He paused to gather his thoughts, but before Jayla's curiosity got the best of her, he continued with a question. "Do you still want to, experiment with the way I look, trying out styles for redheads?" She nodded and he said, "Well, that's already been covered, so that's nothing new. But how about this? You can also do my hair up however you want." He was surprised that Jayla frowned instead of agreeing. "I can't do that," she said. "Why not?" "It won't bother me." Or, just what do you want to do? "Oh, nothing really," she said. "But I'm not very good with hair. I know cosmetics of course, and I can judge styles and shapes and colors very well. But turning an idea for a hairstyle into reality, knowing how to do the cut and set it, I've just never been very good at that. Other than a few simple things I've learned to do on myself, I wouldn't know how to begin." "Oh," Logan said, face falling in disappointment. He tried to work up a smile as he said, "Well, I'll just have to think of something else, then." "Is this really something you'd like to do?" "I suppose that depends on what you'd like my hair to look like," he said. "But I have to admit I've been thinking about it ever since you showed me how different Connie Spencer's hair was from mine." "Who?" "Connie, that is, Constance Spencer. You know, the woman VP at Harrison." After Jayla nodded, Logan said, "Anyway, I was thinking you might want to try something like that." Jayla looked at him for a long moment, assessing both the potential and his own apparent interest in it. After that moment she asked, "Are you beginning to like this idea? Wearing makeup and, well, things?" "I don't really know," he admitted, then confessed. "I spent a little time this week at night in the hotel, surfing for some websites that talk about men dressing like women. I don't think I feel the, excitement that they talk about, but I do know I like to look good. Maybe after reading about all those people who want so badly to be able to dress like women, it doesn't feel as, strange as it did. Like it's a shame guys can't do that more than it's a shame to want to do it. Does that make any sense?" "Lots," Jayla said, nodding thoughtfully. "At first it was sort of naughty, and fun because of that. But now, it's more like, why not? Who is it that said you can't? And who gave them the authority to say so?" "Yeah. That's right." "Well, I say you can, and you gave me the authority to say so," Jayla declared. She paused to gather her thoughts, then said, "Suppose I could find someone to do your hair? Would you be willing?" Logan nodded. "Okay, I'll look into it," she promised. Now I'm breaking free. The Logan McDaniel that flew to Denver the following Monday did not look quite like the one who had flown home the previous Friday. For one thing, he had a perpetual smile on his face. It seemed that going without certain restrictions, not to mention a change in habits, had had an interesting effect on Jayla's sensibilities. The realization that at virtually any time they could get up close and personal with each other had seemed too intriguing to ignore. Or to pass up, when any opportunity presented itself. Somehow, since they had never lacked opportunities at home, it was in public that they were suddenly aware of possibilities they had not noticed before. And in the process, gained a whole new appreciation for each other's creativity. But that was not the only way in which he looked different. Jayla had indeed managed to work something out about his hair. True to her nature and his needs, what she had done was subtle, no drastic changes or obvious alterations. In fact, with only 2 days in which to work, no permanent changes were made. But where Logan's hair had been flat and lifeless, uniform in length and string straight, there was now an auburn crown of thick, rolling glory. Jayla had called on one of her stylist friends, and soon Logan's hair had been trimmed a little for shape and looked even shorter due to the increased height and volume. But the biggest change was a casually exuberant lock that fell across his forehead instead of being trapped tautly by the clasp that still controlled the main mass. Jayla had been ecstatic at the new look, and even Logan had been more than merely accepting of it. Some men with intrinsically wavy hair might look that way naturally, which was all that he needed to justify his own pleasure at the improvements. Unfortunately, since he could not go to work with freshly styled hair, he needed to set it every day. Included among his equipment for the trip was a new curling iron with a thick barrel for setting gentle waves. That, plus the practice he had performed over the weekend, would have to do, along with getting up half an hour earlier every morning. Ecstatic would not have been the first word choice to characterize the reaction of his coworkers and clients at Harrison. Oblivious would be more accurate. Which was surprisingly disappointing to McDaniel. He got a couple of new haircut questions, but the questioners had hardly waited for an answer before jumping into the problems at hand. In truth, that should not have been surprising. When immersed in a project, most software engineers would have been oblivious to anything short of a nuclear strike, and noticed that only if they happened to be passing close to the sparsely distributed windows at the time. They had, for the most part, homes and families and real lives outside of work. But they shared a profound ability to focus when at work, which was why they and Harrison were so successful. Even Tyler Andrews initially seemed not to notice McDaniel's new look despite the fact they worked almost shoulder to shoulder. They did discuss it a little later in the day, though, during a caffeine break, coffee for Andrews, Diet Coke for McDaniel. Andrews initiated the discussion by taking the clasp from his own ponytail for a moment. "Your hair's looking good," the dark blonde man said. "That's more than just a new haircut, isn't it?" "Yes," admitted the redhead. "My wife suggested I get it cut by a real stylist instead of just hacking off the longest parts myself." "Is that what you used to do?" "Close enough. The barber I went to made it clear that he didn't like long hair on men. But my wife likes it, which is all that really matters." "Indeed," Andrews replied, a note of something in his voice. Then he shrugged and said, "Not many men wear their hair long, even now." "I just started letting it grow a few years ago," McDaniel said. "Have you always had long hair?" "Ever since I moved out of my parents' house," the shorter man shrugged. "It was part of the, incentive." McDaniel nodded, not intending to pry. He noticed that Andrews had made a change of his own, to small loop earrings in each ear. However, discussing jewelry after discussing hairstyles just didn't seem to be appropriate for guys. Maybe this wasn't really a change, anyway. For all he knew, Tyler Andrews might wear loops in his ears regularly. McDaniel swallowed the rest of his Coke and looked at Andrews to see if he were ready to go. Andrews nodded and pulled his hair back behind his head as they stood. Still, talking about hair was, in 2 minutes, more casual conversation than they had shared in a week. Despite his commitment to doing a good job for his clients and his success at it, McDaniel was married to a model who loved him as much as he loved her. As a result, a part of his mind was always thinking of her, thinking of ways to please her. He found one partway through the week while spending the now required few minutes working on his newly complicated hairstyle while the television played across the hotel room. And so, when he reached his house that Friday, he had another surprise for his lovely bride, another private idea that could share even, sort of, in public. Jayla had her own, though the significance of it was initially as subtle as the existence was obvious. When Logan came through the door to his home that Friday, he found his raven-haired bride wearing yet another fantasy outfit. Sheer, billowing harem pants hinted at her continuing commitment to her self-imposed prohibition on undergarments. A matching top, carefully designed to uplift without actually concealing anything, maximized her model slim figure. Huge hoop earrings, heavy slate bracelets, and darkly outlined eyes completed an image that had spawned legends that transcended culture, legends that were as bold as any that had made the transition into modern culture. Wow, Logan said softly, more praise than boisterous applause. Jayla swayed toward him, deliberately overemphasizing a sinuous hip undulation, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Welcome home, my lover," she purred. A moment's exploration by her waist against his pelvis, and she confirmed yet another sign of his appreciation. "Happy to see me, are you?" Yeah, he replied, cursing his lack of eloquence, though a part of him realized, as did Jayla, that it was in fact a very clear message. The heavy bracelets Jayla wore clinked behind Logan's head, and that sound seemed to release him from the thrall of sensuality she had woven around him. Not that it diminished it, but he was no longer frozen in wonder. His own arms came up to surround the taut waist revealed between the harem pants and abbreviated top she wore, while his lips drifted down to capture those lifted to him. Things would have proceeded to the obvious conclusion, perhaps in creative ways but nonetheless inevitable, but they were interrupted when Jayla discovered Logan's own present. The trail of his clothes reached the point where his pants hit the floor, then stopped at her exclamation. "You shaved?" He grinned, then deliberately misunderstood. Logan rubbed his chin and said, "Sure. Every day." "No," Jayla said, eyes lighting with pleasure. "You shaved your legs, and well." "Actually, I didn't," he claimed, though in fact, his body was essentially hairless below the auburn mass that capped it. That essentially exemption dealt primarily with a rather carefully shaped accent that remained. "I seem to remember something a bit less smooth, and I was definitely paying attention," she said. "Now that part is true," he agreed. "It's just that I didn't shave the hair off." "Oh, sure. I understand," Jayla said, once again to find out she was wrong. "I hope not," said Logan, wincing. "I used that NAD stuff, and it hurt like hell." "I hope you don't really know what that's like." "Well, actually I do," she said sympathetically, "but not any more often than I really have to. I think even waxing is easier than that stuff, though the difference is sort of academic." "Now I know," Logan said, grimacing again at remembered yanks at deeply rooted hair. Jayla ran her soft hands over his smooth contours and asked, "Why did you do that?" "You said you didn't like hairy men," he replied simply, as though that were the only relevant point. "You were never particularly hairy," Jayla said, acting as though what he had done had not really been necessary. And of course it hadn't been necessary, but her hands never stopped moving over his body, and it was clear that, necessary or not, it was highly appreciated. In a little while, she was showing him just how much it was appreciated, even as he was confirming the value in her own fantasy-fulfilling creativity. Logan woke up first Saturday morning. He was in the shower when his wife slithered in to share the delicious hot pressure. Her first motion was to once again put her arms around him, though this time it was a prelude to moving him so that she could be under the spray. "You forgot to take your bracelets off," Logan said. "No I didn't," she replied. He chuckled and said, "It may be early, and you definitely fried my mind last night, but, I think I can tell when you're banging metal bands on the back of my neck." She said, leaning back to let the water stream down her face, and other interesting places. If her intention was to distract him, it worked. But not quite enough to derail his questions. Instead, he moved his hands to institute a little teasing of his own. It wasn't long before Jayla was gasping, at which point he stopped. "Oh," she moaned. "Don't stop." "Why are you still wearing your bracelets?" he asked, resuming his tender ministrations at a level that would keep her interested but unsatisfied. They don't come off, she answered with a self-satisfied smile. So I didn't forget to take them off, see? What do you mean they don't come off? What part of that didn't you understand? She asked, leaning up to lightly nibble on his lower lip. Then she giggled and leaned back. They're welded on, and too small to slip over my hands. I know you don't want me hurting my wrists, but these are wider and rounded, and they don't hurt even if I lay on them. Her voice took on a more serious tone as she said, Logan, darling, I do love you. I want you to know that I am yours anytime you want. You can lock my wrists together with anything from a heavy chain to a piece of string, and I will trust you to take care of me. This is like our wedding rings or something, a sign of commitment. Only this is a different kind of commitment than being married. Or, maybe I should say it's a commitment to a particular, flavor of being married. Anyway, it's a permanent sign of my trust in you. And if you don't ever want to tie them together, well, they're just shiny jewelry. With that, and before he had a chance to speak, she took the soap and handed it to him, then turned her back to him. Now, wash me before we run out of hot water. If we hurry, we'll have time to shave each other's legs. They didn't have time for that, though their legs didn't really need it anyway. In fact, they had to finish their basic showers in cold water since hurry was not Logan's focus. At least, not for a while. When, some time later, Jayla walked from the bathroom, she saw Logan with the hot comb in his hair. You don't have to do that for me, she said. I never have to do this, he answered. But I've been practicing all week. I'll be damned if I waste this chance to do it for you. Jayla smiled and leaned over to give him a hug, stroking her fingers down his smooth leg as she did so. You do so much for me. Not enough, he said with his own smile.